Learning Greek can feel like dumping like a 10,000 piece puzzle on the table, and at first it's just completely intimidating, all these random pieces everywhere, and you just feel like this is hopeless. But you know what you do with the puzzle, right? I mean, you find certain patterns, like, okay, these all have straight edges, so they must go around the perimeter. Or these are all blue, so they go up here in the sky. Or this one's red, so it must be the barn. And over time, this picture comes into focus. Well, that's what we're doing right now. And right now, we're kind of at the point where we have the puzzle dumped on the table, and you're just like, what in the world? This will never make sense to me. It will. And I want to encourage you not to give up. Remember, we're not climbing molehill Greek here. We're climbing Mount Greek. This is quite an accomplishment to learn Greek. So don't give up. All right, and let me encourage you too, that the material will come to you in waves. So we've looked at first and second and third declension. We've seen how nouns change form to show us their case, number, and gender. Now, we get to review that actually for 10 videos now, because when we look at the article, we'll be looking at first and second declension again. When we look at adjectives, we'll cover all three declensions again. When we look at pronouns, we'll see the same ideas again. So this will hit us in wave after wave after wave, and slowly it will sink in and come into focus. Trust me on that one, okay? Today, the article. The Greek article has many similarities with the English article, but there are three very important differences. The first one is that there is no indefinite article in Greek. Now, what does that mean? Okay, in English, we have a definite and an indefinite article. So I can talk about the tree. That's the definite article. I mean, the tree, that specific tree, that one, okay? Or I can use the indefinite article if I want to be undefined about the trees. I say a tree, meaning any of those trees, one of those trees, a tree, right? Okay, so definite the and indefinite a. But in Greek, there's no way to say a, okay? There's no indefinite article. And you say, well, wait a minute, well, then how do Greeks have an indefinite idea? Well, usually they just leave the article out if the idea is indefinite, but it's not quite that simple. And that leads to the second important difference between the Greek and English article, and that is that the article in Greek is used differently in many cases than it would be in English. It is more versatile, it is more nuanced, it is actually more beautiful, but it takes some time to get used to this. And as you read Greek and just absorb a lot of Greek, you start to see these things. But this takes some time, okay? But just be aware, the way that the article is used in Greek and English, not always the same. And then the third thing, and this is critical too, but there are 24 forms of the Greek article. Now in English, there is only one form of the definite article, and actually one form of the indefinite. But let's just talk about the definite, the. Okay, so I use the in English if I'm talking about the man, the men, the woman, the women, the house, the cat. It's always the, right? Okay, because there's just one form. But in Greek, what we'll see is that the article changes form, morphology, right? It morphs to match the noun that it modifies. So if it's talking about a singular masculine subject, it will be nominative masculine singular, and all the way through. Now, if you can understand these 24 forms and why they exist, you're well on your way to understanding Greek morphology, at least with regard to the substantive. So you're like, if you can grasp this lesson, you're way down the road. Yay! So let's go on. Let's understand this Greek article. Take a look at this example. Notice that in English, if I talk about the man, the men, the woman, the women, the work, the works, doesn't matter. The article stays exactly the same for anything that it modifies. But look what happens in Greek. Do you see these changes? And more importantly, do you see why we have these changes? Because Greek is much more specific in many ways than English is. Notice that the article will change to match the subject. So if I'm talking about one man, singular, I use a nominative masculine singular article. And if I'm talking about men as the subject of the sentence here, I would use nominative plural form of the article. Now again, in English, no difference. But in Greek, you have these different forms to tell you all this information. Notice in English, too, it doesn't tell you if it's the subject or the object or the indirect object, any of that information. It's just the. But in Greek, you get all this information from the article. Beautiful, isn't it? Okay. Look, now if I want to say the woman, notice again, no change in English, but in Greek, I need to use the feminine article. If I want to make that plural, I need to use the nominative plural here, again, assuming that these are all subjects. And if I want to talk about the work, a neuter noun, I have to use the neuter article. Singular here, the work, or plural, ta erga, the works here. So can you see that the article is changing form to match the noun that it modifies? Now compare the article with the noun endings chart. The article follows a 2-1-2 pattern of change. Now remember, nouns didn't do that sort of thing. If a noun was second declension masculine, for example, that's what it is. There's no such thing as a feminine form of logos or a masculine form of arche. Nouns are masculine or feminine or neuter, which is why there are only 8 forms here. But now notice with the article, it needs to be able to modify the man, the woman, or the work. So it needs to be able to be masculine and feminine and neuter. So it needs to be 3 times 8 possibilities, or 24 forms of the article. That's how we come up with that number. So we would speak of ha, logos, he, arche, ta, ergon. Can you see how you use the article to match the case, number, and gender of the noun that it modifies? If I wanted to speak of genitive plural, tone, logon. You can see tone doesn't change here. Tone, archon, tone, ergon. If I was going to say accusative plural, for example, tous, logus, I would not say ta, logus, because that would be putting a neuter plural article with a masculine plural noun, okay? So the article always matches the word that it modifies in case, number, and gender. And by the way, do you see a wave hitting you here, okay? Because these endings that we learned for the nouns, os, u, o, on, well, that's the pattern followed by the article, a, u, o, on. Now we've learned that single males can be trouble here, but this nominative masculine singular is a little odd. The feminine's just exactly alike. The neuter's a little bit different, ta, ergon. But you can see here that these endings, if you know your noun endings, the article just looks like the noun endings with a tau attached. For example, hoi, lagoi, ton, lagon, tois, lagois, tous, lagus. Do you see that the endings are just attached to a tau, and that becomes the article? So the masculine follows this second declension right here. The feminine follows the first declension. So we would say he, arche, tes, arches, te, arche, tain, archein, hai, archai, ton, archon, tais, archais, tas, erchas. See all the beautiful matching there? Okay. And I'll do the neuter just to drive this in too. Again, in the nominative form, it's a little odd, but ta, ergon, tu, ergu, to, ergo, ta, ergon. Ta, erga, ton, ergon, tois, ergois, ta, erga. So can you see that what you've already learned in the nouns, well, it's coming at you again now with the article. The only difference is, again, that with the nouns we have 3 different words because a noun will be either masculine or feminine or neuter, but the article is able to be all 3. And it follows in the masculine gender the second declension, in the feminine gender the first declension, and in the neuter gender the second declension. Now let's look at the article in the wild. Okay, let's look in John 1 and see how the article is used. And what we will see is that it doesn't matter the declension of the noun that the article modifies. The article will always follow this 2-1-2 pattern. And what we will see is that this is a great help to us. Let me show you. Okay, let's look at some articles in the wild here, okay? And there are 51 verses in John 1. We won't look at them all. It would take a long time, plus it would get really repetitive. But let's just demonstrate here how the article always matches what it modifies in case, number, and gender. So here we have ha, logos. Okay, logos, of course, is nominative, masculine, singular. And see, here's the sweet thing. Even if you didn't recognize that ending, which of course by now you should, but even if you didn't, if you knew your articles, you would see ha has to be nominative, masculine, singular. So whatever this is, the article tells you that this is nominative, masculine, singular. So the article is like another great clue. Here we have it again, ha logos, and the word was pros ton theon. Now ton, do you remember where we'll find ton? Hopefully you're thinking accusative here. Notice the article matches, ton theon. So with God, pros takes the accusative here. All right, moving on down. Let's see what else we got. Hutas einen arche pros ton theon. Another repetition there. All right, okay, here's a new one. Hey Zoe. The light was the light. Okay, hey Zoe. Hey here is our nominative feminine singular form, so that makes sense. Hey Zoe. The life, feminine noun, was taphos. Taphos. Phos is, we say we don't know this. This is a third declension, remember, and it's that, third declension's a little weird. Well, hey, wait, we know it's neuter, and it's either nominative or accusative, right? Okay. Because this is a to be verb, predicate nominative, this is nominative. Okay, so that matches. This is a good example, though, of how, okay, ta here is actually second declension, the article. Phos is third declension. That's okay. They don't have to match in declension. They only have to match in case, number, and gender. So here we have nominative, singular, neuter. All right, moving on down. The life was the light, ton anthropon. Okay, you can see the match there pretty easily, right? Ton anthropon. And anthropos is masculine, so actually we wouldn't know it right by the article here. It could be masculine or feminine or neuter, but we know, hopefully, that anthropos is masculine, so this is of men. And by the way, sometimes it's not necessary to know. You could probably guess that anthropos would be male, but sometimes you don't have to know every gender of the noun. You can still understand it just fine. All right, here's taphos, the light, in te skatia. All right, do you see the match here? Te skatia. We have our feminine dative, singular, right? And in always takes the dative. So this article, once you see te like that, you know it's dative, singular, feminine. Easy, right? And whatever this word looks like, the article gives it away, which is, again, articles are our friend. And here we have the darkness, he skatia. So we have the nominative form, he, with skatia. Okay, eta, alpha. Remember, it's okay either way. Okay, let's slide on down here a little ways. In verse 7 here, we have peri tu photos. Okay, tu photos. Now here we have another example of photos. Here is a genitive, right? And here we have tu, which is also genitive. This is third declension. This is second declension. But again, the declension doesn't have to match, just the case, number, and gender. But what's beautiful here, again, about this article, is once you see tu, you know that it's either masculine or neuter, and that it's definitely genitive singular. Phos is, if memory serves here, neuter. Okay, so it's neuter. But here, that's another case where, who cares if it's masculine or neuter? We get it, it's genitive concerning the light. Peri, here, demanding the genitive. All right, and here we have phos again, and here's ta phos. So here was he was the light. So here, this is nominative. Here we have another example of the genitive. Lots of light going on there. Let's skip on down. Eistan kosman. Okay, you can see the match there, right? See how the article, in English it's just the every time, right? But in Greek it's changing to match the case, number, and gender. Am I over making this point? Am I insulting your intelligence? I hope not. Hakosmos, we've seen that. Well, here's an interesting ta idia, his own ones. This is actually will be a pronoun, but we'll get to that later. But the ta here is, if we didn't recognize this, well, actually we should, but ta tells us that this is either nominative or accusative, and it's neuter. Okay, and so into ace we'll take the accusative, so this one would be accusative. But again, if we didn't recognize this word, this tells us the case, number, and gender. Oh, don't we love the article? And hoi idioi, his own ones. So once again, we have an example of plural, nominative plural, masculine. All right, okay. Piece of cake, piece of cake. Oh, here we have tois pistiusin. Now, this is actually a participle. Notice that it's multicolored. We'll get to that later. But we know the case, number, and gender of this participle because it's either masculine or neuter, and it's dative plural, right? Okay. And in this case, it would be masculine, but don't worry about that. Ta anima, here's our mot stem, but ace ta anima, ace with the accusative, so that's accusative. Ta, see the form here, ta. Okay, all right, sliding on down. Here we have halagos again, nice nominative singular masculine. Tain doxon, so tain, accusative, accusative. Is this all making sense? Maybe I shouldn't have said that we would do 25 verses because this is just too easy. The one after me coming, I wanted to just point this one out because here's an example of the Greek article acting very strange to an American understanding here. It's acting almost like a pronoun, and the article can do that. The after me coming, which is how you'd, well, we have to supply the word one in English to make it make sense. But again, the article in Greek and the article in English, not exactly the same, okay? And we'll learn about this as we get better at Greek. Here we have ek with the what? Genitive, right? So genitive, here's our second declension genitive. Here is our third declension genitive. Again, the declension does not have to match, but the case, number, and gender do. All right. Ha, namas. Okay, another example of nominative singular masculine. Hey, charis. Okay, here's an interesting one because hey, okay, this can only be feminative. This can only be nominative. I'm doing this too much, I guess. Nominative, feminine, singular, right? Hey. Charis, we might not know. Is that a masculine, feminine, or neuter? It's feminine because the article gives it away. So charis is feminine. Also, here we have hey, aletheia, which is truth. Well, aletheia must also be feminine. All right? Okay, so let's just look at some more accusatives here. Ton, kolpon. So just recognize those endings right here, right? Tu patros, of the father. Again, we have a second declension, third declension, no problem, because the case, number, and gender match. And again, these really help. The articles really help sometimes if we get mixed up on third declensions. If there's an article, it gives it away, right? Very nice. Okay. Hey, martyria. So a nice nominative, nominative feminine singular. Tu Ioannou. Just pointing out the matches. Hoi Iudaioi, the Jews. So it's plural here, right? And now let me show you something that's maybe a little different. Scrolling on down. Well, actually, this isn't different at all. Ha Christos. We have nominative, singular masculine. There's our nice ending. And right here, oh, here's the weirdo right here. Ha prophetes. Now look at this one, because when you look at this ending, ace, that looks like a genitive feminine singular ending or something like that. But look at this article. This is the nominative singular masculine article. So what's going on? Well, what's going on is that prophet is a strange declining noun. Actually, it is an example of a first declension masculine. Now, I said that the first declension was usually, most of the time, almost without exception, feminine, but there are some weirdos. And here's an example of one. But it's also an example of where the article is your friend, because when you see, if you saw this, you might be thinking genitive feminine singular. But when you see the ha in front of it, you know it has to be nominative masculine singular. Okay, so that's just an example of the article sort of bailing us out here. Oh, here's a good one. Tois pimsasin hemas. This is another participle. Don't worry about that, but we know that that participle is dative plural, right? It might be nominative and it might be, it might be masculine and it might be neuter. There we go. And by the way, it's just easy to mix up these categories. So if you're doing it, don't be too hard on yourself. See, look, I've been doing this 10 years. I still do it some. Okay, all right, finishing this up. In te eremo. Here we have a dative, right? Oh, this is another example of an oddball, isn't it? Because this ending right here says second declension, does it not? The omega with the iota subscript. But here we have a first declension article. So here we have an example of a noun right here that is actually a second declension noun, follows the second pattern, but it's feminine. Okay, so there are oddballs, but don't worry too much about that. I mean, if you saw in te eremo, it wouldn't throw you off. It's in with the dative. And whether desert happens to be feminine or masculine or neuter, really, in this case, who cares, right? We know it's feminine because, well, our article tells us. So here we have tain hadan. Boy, this is just like the wasteland of strange nouns. Hadan looks like to us like an accusative second declension, right? But once again, we know that it's feminine. So here is another example of a noun that actually follows the second declension, but it's feminine. So that can happen. Based on these verses, it looks like it happens all the time. It happens everywhere. It doesn't. This is kind of an odd passage. Here we have this strange prophet one again. We have this nominative masculine singular noun, but we've got this ending that looks first declension. So this is another example where we have a noun that follows the first declension, but it turns out it's masculine. That can happen. It usually doesn't. For the most part, you can count on the article. The article is your friend. It will very rarely lead you astray, okay? Ha Christos, once again, so we are home free. Oh, ha prophetes. Well, we might as well end with this troublemaker, right? Okay, so there's some articles in the wild, and I hope that you're seeing the patterns here. How in every case, the article will match the noun that it modifies in case, number, and gender. So there you have it. That is the Greek article. Now we'll see that all of the Greek substantives have case, number, and gender. And we see that with the nouns, they will be either masculine or feminine or neuter. They'll just pick a gender, right? But with all of the modifiers, and this will include the article, the adjectives, later we will see with the pronouns, they have to be able to be masculine and feminine and neuter because they modify all three genders, okay? So with the article, we saw that in the masculine gender, it follows second declension. In the feminine gender, it follows first declension. And in the neuter gender, it follows second declension. 2, 1, 2 is the pattern it follows. Now, if you can grasp that, you really are starting to get Greek substantives. And if you're not grasping it, don't panic, because another wave is coming. Next we look at the 212 adjective, and we'll see that it's exactly like the article.